What happens when a man who built an entire company is suddenly treated like he doesn't matter? Imagine dedicating your whole life to something, only to be humiliated in front of everyone you once called colleagues. That's exactly what happened to Henry. But what no one expected was the shocking lesson he would teach that night, one that left everyone speechless. Stay with me, because this story will change the way you see respect and wisdom forever. Henry Caldwell stood at the entrance of the grand hall, his pulse quickening as he took in the opulence surrounding him. The chandeliers hung like glittering stars from the high ceiling, casting a warm glow over the throngs of young professionals mingling and laughing. He adjusted his tie, feeling a pang of nostalgia mixed with apprehension. At 70, he was a relic in this vibrant world of youth and innovation. As he stepped inside, the laughter echoed in his ears, a reminder of the days when he had been at the center of it all. "Henry, is that you?" A familiar voice called out, breaking through his thoughts. It was Linda Carter, his former assistant, her eyes sparkling with recognition. She rushed over, pulling him into a warm embrace. "It's so good to see you. You haven't changed a bit," she teased, stepping back to admire him. "Neither have you, Linda. Still the bright spark of the office," he replied, a smile creeping onto his face. "What brings you here tonight? You know this crowd can be a bit overwhelming," she said, glancing around at the younger executives with a hint of concern. "I thought it might be nice to reconnect, to see how things have changed. But I do feel a bit like a fish out of water," Henry admitted, his gaze drifting to a group of young executives who were animatedly discussing the latest trends. As they reminisced about the old days, Henry felt a momentary warmth wash over him. Yet beneath that comfort lay an unmistakable distance. The younger generation seemed to orbit a different world, one where his contributions were mere footnotes in their fast-paced narrative. "Have you heard from Ryan Peterson?" Linda asked, her tone shifting. "He's been making waves lately." Henry chuckled softly. "I can only imagine. The future is in his hands, or so he believes." His words were laced with an edge of skepticism, a sentiment that was shared by many of his contemporaries. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere shifted. Ryan Peterson, the brash young executive, took to the stage, his bravado filling the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming, "we've outgrown the old ideas that once defined us. We're the future now." His words echoed through the hall, and laughter erupted from the crowd, but it felt like daggers to Henry's heart. "Is he really going to dismiss everything we've built?" he murmured to Linda, disbelief etched on his face. "Just wait. He's got a flair for the dramatic," she replied quietly, the concern evident in her eyes. As Ryan continued, mocking the past with a wave of his hand, the laughter of the crowd cut deeper into Henry. He felt a surge of humiliation, a reminder that sometimes the very things you hold dear can become the butt of someone else's joke. The sound of their laughter hung in the air, and for a moment Henry's composure wavered. As the gala buzzed with the glittering chatter of executives and the clinking of glasses, silence fell like a heavy curtain when Linda Carter, Henry's former assistant, stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention, her eyes fiery with indignation as she faced Ryan Peterson, who stood smugly at the podium, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. "Ryan," she said, her voice steady and strong, "do you even understand the legacy you're mocking? Henry Caldwell didn't just build this company, he forged the very foundation we stand on today." The room held its breath, the tension palpable as she continued. "Without his vision and relentless hard work, none of us would be here enjoying this success." Ryan's smile faltered, replaced by a look of irritation. "With all due respect, Linda, that was decades ago. This is a new era, and we need fresh ideas, not relics of the past." His bravado was met with murmurs of discontent from the crowd. They began to remember the value of history. Just then, Mr. Thompson, the wise CEO, stepped into the fray. He raised a hand, silencing the room. "Ryan, let's not be so quick to dismiss the past. It is through the lessons of those who came before us that we shape our future." Henry's contributions were not just significant, they were transformative. His voice resonated with authority, a reminder that respect should be given where it is due. We owe our success to pioneers like him, who blazed trails we are now fortunate enough to walk. With the air thick with anticipation, Henry felt a swell of gratitude towards Linda and Mr. Thompson. They were standing up for him, for experience, and for the wisdom that time breeds. The atmosphere shifted, and he was suddenly aware of the company's palpable support. As the murmurs settled, Henry was beckoned to the stage, a mixture of apprehension and determination coursing through him. With a deep breath, he grasped the microphone, his hands slightly trembling. "Thank you, Linda and Mr. Thompson," he began, his voice gaining strength. It's easy to overlook the past when you're chasing the future, but we must remember that history is our greatest teacher. Innovation is essential, yes, but let us not discard the lessons learned along the way. As he spoke, the room began to resonate with his words, a wave of understanding washing over the audience. Every success we've achieved is built on the shoulders of those who came before us. We must learn from them, honor them, and carry their legacy forward. The applause erupted, a standing ovation that filled him with warmth and pride. He caught a glimpse of Ryan in the audience, his bravado crumbling, replaced by a look of realization. This was not just a victory for Henry, it was a moment of reckoning for the younger generation, a chance to understand the true essence of respect and collaboration. After the gala, the air was thick with an uneasy silence as Ryan Peterson approached Henry Caldwell. The younger executive's expression was a mixture of remorse and confusion. The laughter from the crowd still echoed in his ears, and he found himself grappling with the weight of his earlier words. Mr. Caldwell, Ryan began, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what I said last night. Henry, ever gracious, met Ryan's gaze with a warm smile that belied the tension of their previous encounter. It's all right, Ryan. The passion of youth can sometimes cloud judgment, he replied, his tone calm. I appreciate your willingness to come forward. The sincerity in Henry's voice seemed to soften the young executive's rigid posture, if only slightly. If this story is already making you feel something, imagine how many others need to hear this lesson. Hit the like button right now so more people can see this powerful message. And tell me in the comments, have you ever seen wisdom being underestimated? Let's spread respect together. As the sun rose the following morning, Henry sat in his favorite armchair, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in his hands. He gazed out the window, lost in thought. The night before had been a whirlwind of emotions. Pride for his achievements and sadness for the younger generation's apparent disregard for the lessons of the past. What is it about youth that makes them so dismissive? He murmured to himself, shaking his head. They think they know everything. Meanwhile, Ryan was wrestling with his own thoughts. He paced his apartment, the shadows of the gala lingering in his mind. What was I thinking? He muttered, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The laughter of his peers had felt empowering at the time, but now it left a bitter taste. I can't believe I mocked him like that, he confessed to himself, realization dawning. I underestimated him. Experience matters. In that moment of reflection, Ryan began to question his approach to leadership. Was he truly as invincible as he believed? The idea of learning from someone he had dismissed felt like a foreign concept, yet it became increasingly appealing. As he sank onto the edge of his bed, he pondered the value of wisdom and the lessons he might gain from someone like Henry. The seed of doubt planted in his mind began to sprout into a desire for growth, but could he overcome his pride to embrace it? Henry sat at a small cafe table, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling around him as he stirred his thoughts. Linda Carter, his former assistant and steadfast ally, took a seat across from him, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. The corporate gala had ignited a spark in both of them, and now they were eager to discuss the future. I can't stop thinking about how we need to bridge this gap, Linda said, leaning forward. The younger generation has so much energy, but they lack the understanding of our history. We can't just let that die out. Henry nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. You're right, Linda. Experience is a treasure trove, but it seems they see it as a burden. We need to find a way to change that perception. Linda smiled, her excitement palpable. What if we started a mentorship program? Pairing younger employees with veterans like you could really shift the culture. They might learn to appreciate the wisdom that comes with age. Henry's eyes lit up at the idea. That could work. It would give them a chance to see the bigger picture, to value the lessons that come from years of experience. But how do we get the support we need from management? Well, we can present it to Mr. Thompson first, Linda suggested. He's always valued collaboration and growth. If he backs us, the others might follow. As they continued to brainstorm, the cafe door swung open, and Ryan Peterson entered, his demeanor sharp and confident. He approached the counter, unaware of the conversation unfolding behind him. Henry felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. While he had accepted Ryan's earlier apology, the young executive still represented the arrogance that had stung him the night before. Do you think Ryan would support such a program? Linda pondered aloud. He seems set on proving his own ideas are the best. Henry sighed, gazing at the young man now ordering his drink. He may see it as a threat, but perhaps if he understood the value of mentorship, it could change his perspective. As they spoke, Ryan turned slightly and caught snippets of their conversation. His expression shifted, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He didn't want to think about needing guidance from someone he had once dismissed so easily. The thought of being paired with someone like Henry, who represented everything he had scoffed at, sent a wave of embarrassment through him. Mentorship, Ryan scoffed under his breath, his voice low enough that only he could hear. As if I need help from someone stuck in the past. Unbeknownst to him, Henry caught the edge of Ryan's reaction, an unspoken tension rising between them. The seeds of change were being planted, but not without resistance from the younger generation. Henry felt a sense of determination wash over him, fueled by the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, he could help bridge the divide that had grown so vast. "Let's do it," Henry said resolutely, turning back to Linda. "Let's make this mentorship program a reality. We owe it to ourselves and to the future of this company." The announcement of the mentorship program sent ripples through the office, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. As Henry Caldwell stood in the conference room, he could feel the skepticism radiating from the younger employees, with Ryan Peterson at the forefront. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk plastered across his face. "Seriously? A mentorship program? What's next? A workshop on how to use a rotary phone?" His laughter echoed in the room, eliciting a few snickers from his cohort. Henry's heart sank at the ridicule, but he remained composed. "This program is about bridging the gap between generations," he spoke firmly, his voice steady. "Experience isn't outdated. It's a foundation upon which we can build innovation." Ryan rolled his eyes, leaning forward. "Come on, Henry. You can't seriously believe that your old-fashioned ideas will inspire anyone. We need to move forward, not backward." The dismissive tone in his voice was palpable, igniting a spark of frustration within Henry. But Linda Carter wouldn't let it slide. She stood up, determination shining in her eyes. "Ryan, you need to understand that wisdom comes from experience. Henry built this company, and his insights can guide us in ways you can't even imagine." Her words hung in the air, challenging the younger crowd to reconsider their stance. A few employees nodded in agreement, murmurs of support beginning to rise. "I remember how he handled that crisis with the client last year," one of them chimed in. "We could definitely use his perspective." However, Ryan was not one to back down easily. Over the next few days, he began rallying his fellow young executives, launching an undercurrent campaign against the program. "We need fresh ideas, not a nostalgic trip down memory lane," he proclaimed during a meeting, his voice rising with fervor. "This program is a step backward. Why should we waste our time on outdated practices?" The tension in the office escalated, conversations turning into subtle factions. Employees were divided, some eager for mentorship, while others, influenced by Ryan's rhetoric, scoffed at the notion. Henry observed the growing divide with a heavy heart, realizing that the challenge ahead was not just about a program, but about shifting the very culture of the company. As he sat in his office, contemplating his next steps, he knew that the path to mutual respect would be fraught with challenges. Yet he also felt a flicker of hope ignited by Linda's unwavering support and the few voices that rose to defend the value of experience. Henry understood that change would not come easily, but he was willing to fight for the legacy he had built, believing firmly that wisdom and innovation could coexist. Mr. Thompson stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding. The murmurs of the gathered employees faded into an expectant silence as he cleared his throat. "I have an important announcement to make," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "After much consideration, I have decided to step down as CEO of this company. It is with great pride that I endorse Henry Caldwell as my successor." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and the atmosphere shifted palpably. Henry's heart raced. He had never imagined such a moment would come. Ryan Peterson, perched at the edge of the room, felt the ground beneath him shift. Disbelief washed over his face as he processed the revelation. This was the man he had openly mocked, the man he had dismissed as relic from an outdated era. Now here he was, being handed the reins of the company. Ryan's stomach churned at the thought of how his arrogance had just cost him dearly. "Henry has not only been a cornerstone of our success," Thompson continued, "but he embodies the balance we need between innovation and the invaluable insights of experience. We must learn from our past to forge a better future." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Henry felt a swell of pride and gratitude. He glanced at Linda, who beamed with joy at his accomplishment, and then at Ryan, whose face was a mask of confusion and frustration. After the meeting, as the employees dispersed, Henry approached Ryan, who was still processing the shock. "Ryan," Henry said gently, "I know this might be hard to accept, but I'd like to offer you a place in the mentorship program." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I believe we can learn from one another. Your ideas have merit, and I can share insights that might help you grow. Ryan looked up, his bravado stripped away. I don't know what to say, he stammered, vulnerability creeping into his voice. I was wrong. I underestimated you, and this company's legacy. Join me, Henry urged, his eyes earnest. Let's collaborate. Together we can create a culture that respects the past while embracing the future. With a deep breath, Ryan nodded, the weight of his arrogance lifting. I accept, Henry. I'd like that, he replied, sincerity shining through. As they shook hands, a new understanding blossomed between them, breathing life into the office atmosphere. The colleagues who had witnessed this exchange felt a renewed sense of hope for their company, realizing that wisdom and innovation could coexist. Henry's leadership and Ryan's vibrant ideas promised a future where both experience and youth could thrive together, as they built a legacy that would honor the past while boldly facing the future. If this story touched your heart, then you belong to a special group of people who still believe in respect and experience. Don't miss out on more stories like this. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell. And if you know someone who needs to hear this lesson, share this video with them. Let's remind the world that wisdom is priceless.